Hey students, this is topic F4. It's entitled Exponents with Negative Bases. So how to handle those, how to simplify them. And if you're on IXL, it's shortcut ZQC. You could type that in the search bar, ZQC, and it would pop up for you. So if you're trying to pass that, you can pull it up and work them out with us as we go here. So our first problem says we have -3 in parentheses to the power of 2. So I don't want to assume you know what an exponent is, so I'm just going to do a quick refresher. Exponents can always be, if you write out the word exponents, they can always be, look at these three letters, expanded. You can always expand the exponents. And that is a great strategy for handling exponents, no matter how complicated they get from elementary level all the way to calculus. Just expand them out when you don't know the fancy rules that they turn into being. So let's try this strategy. Here's the deal. You might remember that if I had, let's say, 2 plus 2 plus 2, this became what? Repeated addition. That became a big 3 times 2. We should put the dot there anymore, but 3 times 2. So this is the idea of having a rectangle that's, hey, there's 2 in each column and there's 3 columns. And so you would say, well, we could take 2 plus 2 plus 2, but you also could just say take 3 times 2. Very similar to this, but in some ways totally different. Notice the big plus sign told you were going to use the big 3. Okay? But over here, we have a little bitty number, a little bitty 2. And this 2 does tell you have 2 of what's below, but guess what operations between them? It's not the big plus sign like the big number gave you, multiplication. The little bitty number connects these two with a little bitty dot. Maybe that'll help you not mix this up, but exponents are talking about repeated multiplication. That's what exponents are. So when we say expand those out, we're really just saying picture it in your mind as a repeated multiplication problem, expand it out. So -3 times -3. Now wait a second, 2 negatives multiply to give us, let's think about that. One way you can understand this is to think that the opposite of a negative, that's what negative means, is opposite, is going to be a positive. Or some people use this little cool triangle thing. If you think of the letter M for multiplication, you can picture there being a triangle here. This is a cool technique, although it's not very conceptual, but it is a cool technique. We know that negative people, if life is like a triangle, everyone's trying to work their way up to the top and be the leader of their job or the supervisor. That negative people don't work their way to the top. Negative people stay in the bottom of the triangle in life. Nobody sees a real negative person and says, wow, you should totally be the boss of this place. I mean, you just tear people down so well. You'd be great in leadership. Nobody does that. Negative people stay in the bottom. Positive people rise to the top. And this little triangle could be a handy way to handle both multiplication and division, which are kind of like inverse operations. They undo each other. So this triangle, I used to hate it, but I've just come to realize it helps a lot of students, so I let them use it. We try to discover multiplication in terms of repeated addition. Like if I have 3 times -2, that's 3 -2s. So negatives add together, bad guys plus bad guys plus bad guys to give you bad guys. This is going to be -6. So hopefully you can understand a concept such as, one negative means I have a bunch of negative numbers being added, and that gives me a negative. But if you don't, here's how the triangle works. Ready? This is the last thing we need to know with confidence to just knock down these problems. Negative times a negative is going to equal the one that's not circled, in this case, positive. So you can use that triangle if that helps you. I have a lot of students who just draw that triangle every time just because the conceptual thoughts are a struggle for them. I hope you can get to where you understand conceptually that 1 negative makes it negative and 2 negatives is kind of like having 3 opposite groups of a negative and they become positive. But that's a little tricky for a lot of students, so feel free to use something like this triangle. It works anytime you're multiplying and dividing. Okay, hey, our answer is 9, and we have covered every corner of these problems except for one last type of problem. So let's take a look at that problem. Here we go. Hey, in this problem, a lot of people will miss this because they actually aren't sure whether the negative sign, if there's 3 of those negative signs. In other words, would we say that if we expanded this out, is it -2 times -2 times -2? I'm going to put a question mark. Or is it saying you have 2 times 2 times 2, and the negative sign isn't included with the 3? Well, here's the deal. An exponent, if I could just write this really big, an exponent always applies only to what's right underneath it. So does that include the negative? You actually assume that it doesn't. If they wanted it to include the negative, they would have had to put a parenthesis around it. But because they didn't, we actually assume that that negative sign is second priority. It's not going to happen first. First thing you got to do is say that I have 3 of the 2's, and the negative one sits out front waiting for you to get done writing your 3 2's. So this is the wrong way. This is the right way. You have 3 2's and a negative sign sitting out front. That negative sign makes me nervous. Well, I know it does for a lot of students. Why don't we just think of it as a negative 1 getting multiplied times the 3 2's? So this is the best way to think about it. So 2 times 2 times 2 would be 8, and then you'd take 8 times negative 1, which would give you negative 8. Kind of tricky, but go ahead and try one yourself. We'll look for one more maybe that's just a little bit harder. Here's one we haven't tried, one with a negative sign, and there's 3 of them. Let's write it out and see if we can get this one down to where we understand it well. If I had negative 1, now notice the 3 is outside of a parenthesis. The base of the exponent is actually the whole thing. It's this negative 1. So we have 3 negative 1's. We just expand those out. We can do that in our mind. Be careful here. If you think of that triangle that we referenced a moment ago, negative people stay in the bottom, positives in the top. Here you have 3 numbers. Just multiply 2 at a time if you want to handle these smoothly in the beginning. Eventually you'll see patterns and just deal with the signs all at once. But in the beginning, handle 2 at a time. Negative times negative gives us a positive. The third one, that's not marked. You could circle those if you want. So that would be positive 1. I've got to bring down the one I haven't used yet. So this line up above is equal to this line. I've just dealt with these 2 right here. And now 1 times negative 1, that means I have a negative times a positive. That's going to equal the one that's not being used yet. That would be a negative 1. Okay. Hey, that's going to wrap up this topic. We're going to let you guys give it a shot yourself. Let me know if you have any questions, and best of luck to you guys. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Love you guys.